Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a book that gives this incredible inside look at, well, one of the most powerful tech companies out there.
Yeah, we're diving into Careless People, a cautionary tale of power, greed, and lost idealism by Sarah Wynn-Williams.
And it's not just some, academic analysis. It's a personal story, right? From someone who was actually inside Facebook's policy team during a really turbulent time.
Exactly. That's what makes it so gripping. You're getting this ground-level view of someone trying to navigate, technology, global politics, big corporate culture, all colliding.
Right, from the inside.
It puts a very human face on these huge forces shaping, well, everything, really.
Okay, so our mission today basically is to unpack what these excerpts from Careless People show us. We want to look at the key moments, the conflicts, the culture inside Facebook back then.
Yeah, and try to get a feel for what it was like being there, dealing with the impact of this platform that was just exploding, often with, not much oversight.
And what lessons maybe we can take away from this insider's view.
So where should we start? Maybe with how she even got to Facebook. Because it wasn't like the usual tech path.
Good idea. Yeah, her background was completely different. Before Facebook, she was actually at the UN.
Focused on these massive global problems, biodiversity, ocean protection, climate change, really big picture stuff.
Stuff that needs, endless international cooperation, diplomacy.
And she apparently found that really engaging at first, the whole multilateral diplomacy angle, cross-border issues. But then, well, frustration set in.
Yeah, the source paints a pretty vivid picture of that. Bureaucracy, mainly. The sheer slowness of it all.
There's that one amazing example she gives, sitting in this marathon late-night session on conserving ocean life for the Law of the Sea report.
Okay.
Lawyers from dozens of countries, and they're literally arguing for hours about punctuation.
You're kidding. Punctuation.
Yep, punctuation, while talking about, saving the oceans.
Wow. That really lands. You can just feel the frustration building, right? Like, how can you be arguing about commas when the stakes are so high?
Exactly. It shows that inertia, how these big systems can get bogged down in tiny details.
And you can see why someone passionate about solving these big problems might start looking elsewhere for something more, I don't know, dynamic.
It was where Facebook comes in, around 2009, I think.
Right. She calls it her Facebook epiphany. Facebook had, what, maybe 400 million users then? Which sounds huge, but a lot of people still saw it as just, for college kids or whatever.
But for her, living in D.C., feeling a bit disconnected maybe, logging on was like this lifeline, like going back to a place where her friends and family in New Zealand still were.
Yeah, connection to home.
And then she noticed something else, something that sparked an idea. Politicians were starting to use it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like a politician back home posting vacation photos, which felt really new then. And another friend, Chris Hipkins, just elected, using his profile to actually talk to voters, answer questions directly.
So it wasn't just personal anymore. It was becoming political. Civic.
Exactly. She saw it moving beyond just social networking into this, well, this tool, a communication channel, maybe even a sort of digital town square.
Especially, she mentions, after something like the earthquake back home, a way to connect when normal channels are down.
And that led to this vision, this Facebook diplomat idea.
Okay, what was that exactly?
The idea that Facebook could work with governments proactively. Use the platform after disasters, for example, to get essential info out, connect people, be that lifeline.
Like building bridges before a crisis hits instead of just reacting?
Yeah, and that vision really drove her to want to work there. But getting the job, that was another story.
Not easy, apparently.
No. Took over a year, she says. Lots of interviews, pitching this global policy idea again and again.
This Facebook diplomat role, building relationships before Facebook needed them.
But when she finally got to talk to Marna Levine, who ran the policy team then, the reaction wasn't exactly enthusiastic. Marn apparently cut her off. Said the ideas were interesting, sure, but her team, tiny at the time, was totally underwater.
Swamped.
Yeah. Marn was blunt. The priority was U.S. regulators, the FTC, Capitol Hill, the bodies that actually had power over Facebook as an American company.
So they needed U.S. regulatory experts, not necessarily a New Zealand Facebook diplomat, as Marn put it.
Exactly. That wasn't the immediate need.
Ouch. Must have been tough to hear after developing that whole vision.
For sure. But she kept going through the process, maybe shifted her pitch a bit, and eventually Marn called back.
With a job offer.
Yes, but, and this is wild, The offer itself was incredibly hesitant. Like, the title was Manager of Global Public Policy. Sounded good, but Martin apparently immediately said, but I'm still not even sure this is a job.
Wait, what? Not even sure this is a job after a year of interviewing.
I know, right? And she apparently added something like, is there even enough work? But we'll figure it out.
That doesn't exactly scream confidence or like a clear strategic plan for global policy.
Not at all. It really shows where international policy was for them back then. Very early days, maybe reactive, definitely not fully formed.
But she took it anyway.
She did. Stepped into it feeling like she had no idea what I was getting myself into, still holding on to that initial vision, I guess.
Which leads us right into her first impressions. The culture shock. July 5th, 2011, she walks into the D.C. office.
And the office itself is the first clue. Really utilitarian. Exposed pipes, raw concrete, brake clashing paint, even fake graffiti.
Fake graffiti?
Yeah. Trying to look edgy, I suppose. But it felt totally out of place, she says, inside this really fancy, traditional D.C. building full of lobbyists and corporate law firms.
Like Silicon Valley cosplay dropped into the heart of K Street, trying maybe too hard to be disruptive.
Maybe. And right away, she gets an assignment that throws her straight into that culture clash.
Okay, what was it?
Handling a visit from the Prime Minister of New Zealand, John Key, to Facebook HQ in California, her home country's leader.
Oh, wow. Perfect test case for her Facebook diplomat idea, right? Old world meets new tech world.
Exactly. And coming from diplomacy, her first thought was obvious protocol. Top person meets top person. Mark Zuckerberg hosts the Prime Minister.
Makes sense. Standard procedure in that world.
But inside Facebook, that assumption was apparently met with, like, disbelief, cynicism even.
She mentions an interaction from her interview with Debbie Frost, who later became a friend but was super blunt.
Oh, yeah. Debbie Frost, comms director.
Mm-hmm.
Cut her off talking about her UN work on GMOs or something.
Yes!
Delivered this killer line. If you found those fucking seeds at the boring United Nations interesting, then you're really going to love working here where things are actually interesting.
Wow. Okay. That says a lot about the prevailing attitude, doesn't it? Like, we're the center of the universe, everything else is boring.
Totally. And that attitude definitely applied to the Prime Minister's visit. When the author asked if Mark would meet him, the execs were reportedly just like, seriously, why?
Leading to this incredibly awkward moment described in the book, Mark sees the author with the Prime Minister and his entourage during the meet and greet.
Marches right over, apparently oblivious. Everyone's watching. She tries to bridge the gap, asks, "Hi, Mark, did you want to meet the New Zealand Prime Minister?"
And his reply, in front of everyone.
Just deadpan. No.
Yeah.
I already said I definitely didn't want to do that.
Oh my God. That's blunt. In public.
Yeah. A total shutdown. Really shows his priorities then. Maybe a lack of diplomatic awareness and just his absolute authority to say no, even to a head of state.
Must have been a wake-up call for her. Diplomatic rules clearly didn't apply here.
For sure. And the official meeting wasn't even with Mark. It was with Sheryl Sandberg.
Okay, so maybe a substantive policy discussion there. Tech cooperation, privacy, something. The PM's office had apparently hinted at that.
Nope. Not really. According to the source, the meeting was mostly Sheryl advising the PM on, like, how to use his Facebook page.
Seriously, page management tips.
Yeah. Like the friend limit, using a personal profile versus a page. Then it apparently veered into personal stuff, the author's wedding plans, Sheryl's vacation ideas for New Zealand.
Wait, vacation plans?
And asking the Prime Minister to help her find his friend Choppy, who ran a helicopter business.
Choppy. This sounds completely surreal. No policy talk, just finding Choppy.
Pretty much. The author was left just spinning, like what just happened. Total disconnect between the formality of the visit and the randomness of the meeting.
And it wasn't just the Kiwis who found Facebook's culture a bit strange.
No, there's mention of a German delegation visit too. They were apparently baffled by the deliberately unfinished office look. Like, did Facebook wreck a perfectly good office on purpose?
And her explanation about it being symbolic of moving fast and breaking things didn't exactly land well.
Apparently not. It just reinforced this idea that Facebook was maybe reckless and feckless to these more traditional government types. The whole aesthetic, the posters like think wrong, came across as immature, maybe unstable.
Well, internally, that move fast ethos was very real, embodied by people like Marne Levine.
Oh, yeah. The author calls Marne a true Facebook Stakhanovite. Like, her work ethic was unlike anything she'd seen before, even in demanding law firms.
Stakhanovite, like the super productive Soviet miner.
Exactly. Just relentless, working insane hours, barely breaking up before dawn, seemingly never eating.
As if her whole being, emotions, needs were just poured into the job.
That's how the author perceived it, this sort of numb, efficient, self-denying drive, and that demanding pace, that constant feeling of being underwater, just set the rhythm for the author's life there too.
So you've got this intense internal focus on speed, growth, disruption, crashing against external perceptions and the complexities of dealing with the rest of the world. Seems like a recipe for friction.
Absolutely. And driving that internal culture, she realized, was the growth team. Their priority became the priority.
Which was?
Simple, powerful, growth, more.
More users, more engagement, more everything.
Pretty much. That became the core value.
But initially she still believed the good would outweigh the bad, that the excesses would be managed?
Yeah, she held on to that hope for a while. The product itself still felt basically good connecting people, not, selling missiles or nerve gas, as she puts it. That mission was still there.
And there were projects that seemed to align with that mission, like the organ donation feature?
Right. Good intentions there, definitely. But even that highlighted the internal clashes. The core Facebook instinct was scale data, roll it out everywhere the same way.
But organ donation isn't like rolling out likes. It's complex, legally, culturally.
Exactly. Different rules, different sensitivities everywhere. Marin apparently had to step in and explain this to Cheryl, get them to scale back the initial launch to just a few countries they could manage.
But Cheryl still wanted it to be a big success, a showcase project.
Oh, yeah. She pushed hard, insisted on adding registered as an organ donor as a profile life event, and crucially demanded a huge megaphone pop-up.
A megaphone, like dominating the screen.
Yeah, a big notification pushing people to sign up. The engineers apparently hated it, thought it was too intrusive.
So that classic tension, user experience versus leadership, pushing for maximum impact on their priority projects.
And who gets the final say when those clash?
Let me guess. Mark Zuckerberg.
Bingo. The author mentions getting her first ever direct email from him about some issue. Just 4 words.
4 words? What were they?
I am overruling you.
Wow. Direct. Absolute. No discussion needed.
Pretty much sums up the authority structure.
Okay, so speaking of priorities, things get really interesting around the IPO in 2012, right? People starting to leave, cash out.
Yeah, big-time churn, lots of anxiety about keeping key people, especially top lieutenants, like Javi Olivan, who the author says was almost as powerful as Cheryl.
So she gets this assignment from her boss, Elliot Schrage. Take Javi Olivan to the Summit of the Americas in Cartagena.
But the goal wasn't really diplomacy or policy.
What was it then?
Elliot was totally direct about it. Just make sure Javi has a good time. Make sure he comes back from Cartagena wanting to stay at Facebook.
Keep the talent happy. That was the mission at a major diplomatic summit.
That was the mission.
Yeah.
Forget building relationships with heads of state, which was her original idea for Mark attending. Just keep Javi happy so he doesn't leave before the IPO.
How did that actually play out at the summit? Was Facebook a big deal there yet?
Not really. According to her account, it was a reality check. She'd kind of prepared like they'd be treated like a government delegation. They weren't.
No assigned seats at the big dinner?
Nope. Spent the night standing by the food, watching politicians eat. She tried networking, approaching officials, but most apparently didn't know or care who Facebook was yet. Facebook is not a big deal, was the takeaway.
Humbling, I bet. How did Javi take it?
He was apparently pretty chill about it, just soaking it all in. So she focused on the mission, keep him happy. Found some beers, pointed out famous politicians from their spot by the buffet.
Which leads to that amazing anecdote, the salsa club.
Oh, yeah. Late night, sticky floor, definitely not the formal dinner vibe. And Javi gets convinced he sees Hillary Clinton there.
Hillary Clinton in a random salsa club.
Right. And the author's trying to gently explain, Javi, there's no Hillary Clinton here. She's probably asleep. We're at a back alley club. Apparently, there was even a half-naked woman dancing nearby.
It just perfectly captures that disconnect, right? The excitement maybe being a bit detached from the political reality of the event itself.
Totally. Worlds colliding. But that period where Facebook wasn't seen as a major player by governments, that was about to change fast.
Because of the IPO
Yeah.
and the stock price dropping afterward?
Exactly. Suddenly, growth wasn't just important, it was critical for the share price, for perception. International markets, countries outside the U.S. became hugely important overnight.
So, overcoming regulations, opening new markets, that could directly boost the stock.
Right. Suddenly, her work, which maybe felt a bit sidelined before, was front and center. High stakes.
And that led to some pretty intense assignments. Myanmar jumps out from the source material.
Oh, definitely. The reaction she got, should I stop off in North Korea on the way home? Kind of tells you how remote and closed off Myanmar felt then.
Just starting to open up, barely online, still under the junta's influence.
Yeah. And her description of the capital, Naypyidaw, this massive, empty 20-lane highway leading to this shimmering, unreal presidential palace. It just screams controlled, slightly bizarre environment.
And in the middle of all that, she has this completely unexpected meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi.
Incredible moment. Suu Kyi apparently saw her Facebook badge, called her over, no small talk, just this direct, crucial warning.
About what?
About Chui Man, a key figure, and his deep ties to the junta. The message was basically, be careful. Whatever you say to me, you're saying to the junta.
A stark warning about surveillance and the political reality there.
Wow, heavy. And then things got even more stressful. She got stranded.
Yeah, stranded on that huge empty highway after the meeting. No taxis, no car stopping, panic sets in. She's got another crucial meeting with junta officials, and she's thinking, if I miss this, it could wreck everything.
Javier told her not to come back until she sorted things out right. Couldn't get a cab, wasn't going to cut it. Exactly. So she's trying everything. Holding out a $20 bill, giving friendly thumbs-ups to the few cars that pass. Nothing.
How does she eventually get back?
Finally got a ride, ended up at this kind of stark government ministry building, and things get really tense there.
How so?
The receptionist hears Facebook, seems suspicious, asks for her passport, and then locks it in a drawer right in front of her.
Oh, no. That's terrifying. Passport locked away in a foreign government building, especially there.
Must have been awful.
Yeah.
Then she's led into this grand, dark, throne room type place. Very somber, feudal vibe. Totally alien.
And then the bright lights and camera crew appear.
Yeah, suddenly this blinding light, men with a big video camera, more men in tunics walking in.
She thought she was going to be taken hostage.
For a terrifying moment, yes. Images of ISIS videos flashed through her mind. The fear was real.
But they weren't hostile.
No. Turned out they looked amused, astonished even. They were just waiting for her, ready to film the meeting. Huge relief, I imagine.
So what was the actual issue? Why were they blocking Facebook?
Basically, control. They'd kept the internet expensive and limited for years, built surveillance tools. Now with mobile internet exploding, they were losing that control and scrambling to figure out how to manage it during this tricky transition. Blocking Facebook was like a stopgap measure.
Myanmar wasn't the only place Facebook's approach caused friction, though. Korea came up, too.
Yeah, tied to their general legal stance then. Basically, unless there's a specific local law that clearly applies, foreign governments don't have power over us. Only the U.S. and Ireland really mattered, legally speaking.
And that led to a clash with the police in Seoul, the cybercrime branch.
It escalated, to the point where Elliot Schrage apparently suggested they might need a body.
A body? What does that mean?
Someone from the policy team to fly to Korea and potentially get arrested, like deliberately, to test the authorities' resolve and legal grounds.
Wow. Using policy staff as cannon fodder, essentially.
That's the term she uses. And she notes how the room went quiet as the senior folks realized they definitely weren't going to be the body.
Their eyes fell on her, the most junior person there.
Yep. And her immediate thought, incredibly, was, okay, I'll go. I'll get arrested.
Seriously, she was willing.
She felt it was her job, no real choice. And she even compared it to surviving a shark attack she'd experienced years before, thinking, you know, getting arrested couldn't be that bad compared to nearly drowning in a shark's mouth.
That comparison is intense. It really shows how skewed her perspective on risk and normalcy had become.
Totally warped by the pressure. Thankfully, her husband Tom brought her back to earth.
What did he say?
Just the simple truth. We have a 7-month-old baby. Doing jail time in a foreign country is not a reasonable ask.
The reality check she needed. A reminder of life outside the Facebook bubble.
A very stark one. Which brings us to the personal cost of all this, the toll it took on her.
After Myanmar, she describes this crushing exhaustion, right? Like every molecule being heavy.
Yeah, profound exhaustion.
Yeah.
And this emotional breakdown in a hotel bathtub, just sobbing, realizing Tom was right about the job consuming her, that she'd prioritized it wrongly. A real low point.
And this was layered on top of a serious health crisis after having her baby.
Right. Months of hemorrhaging, struggling just to walk normally, and hiding the worst of it from Tom, feeling he was already overwhelmed.
And while she's on maternity leave, sick, recovering, her boss, Joel Kaplan, is still contacting her constantly.
Daily messages and emails, according to the source, even taking video calls while, as she puts it, sprawled across his bed. Just zero boundaries or apparent concern for her situation.
That constant expectation of being available, no matter what, It's disturbing.
It really is.
And then there was that email incident, the Dirty Sanchez comment from Kaplan about her citizenship test.
Yes. She mentions Googling the term, instantly regretting it, understanding how crude and inappropriate it was coming from her boss.
That led to an HR investigation.
It did, but the way it was handled is troubling, according to her account. She says it was closed out quickly, even though she offered more evidence and corroboration.
They told her more evidence wouldn't make a difference.
Would not have made any difference, is the quote, which is odd, to say the least.
And then right after the HR case closed,
Elliot told her Joel was having my job. No reason given, but the timing made her feel it was clearly retaliation for the HR complaint.
So using the official channels meant to protect employees actually led to professional consequences. That suggests a pretty broken system, or at least one unwilling to hold senior people accountable.
That's certainly the picture painted. It was an incredibly tough time, capped off by that bizarre wasp attack incident.
Right. Stung multiple times behind the knees, crippling pain, and Tom initially driving off.
A moment of pure chaos and pain. But it ends with this really human moment of them both laughing and crying together, this dark, shared realization of how absurd and painful everything felt.
Moving from the personal toll, the book delves deep into the leadership culture, especially around Sheryl Sandberg.
Yeah, a big contrast is drawn between her public lean-in image, the feminist icon empowering women, and some of the experiences described working for her.
Like that Women's Day conference she mentions, sounded performative.
The author describes it as this strange mix, part evangelical revival, part MLM rally, part Tony Robbins Oprah, with favorite execs sharing these polished, relatable stories about work-life balance, like giving kids cereal for dinner. That felt kind of staged.
More about projecting an image than tackling real issues.
That's the impression given. And then there are these more personal, deeply uncomfortable anecdotes, like Sheryl asking the author to share her bed on the private jet.
Share her bed?
Yeah. The author was immediately uncomfortable. Another colleague there, Sadie, apparently just froze. Looked like she'd vacated her body.
Did the author refuse? That must have been hard, saying no to Sheryl.
She did refuse. She links it partly to a previous panic attack on a flight where she snored so badly the crew apparently tented her with fabric. Maybe an aversion to that kind of vulnerability or lack of privacy.
Being tented, that's unbelievably bizarre. Shows the extreme stress she was under. And refusing the bed request, Sheryl wasn't happy.
Reportedly visibly frustrated, yeah.
And Sheryl's demands weren't always about weird personal stuff. Sometimes just intense reactions.
Right, like the story from Davos. Apparently Sheryl went on a tirade because an assistant's badge was missing. Publicly chewed out the author, and Marn Banyan told them just take responsibility, even though badges weren't their job at all.
So Marn told her to just take it, literally stand over the WEF staff until it was fixed.
Yep. Just absorb the blame, fix the trivial problem, shows a willingness to escalate and blame downwards.
There's also that odd story about Sheryl giving Sadie expensive bras.
Yeah, leading to messages about a pretty woman moment, and Sheryl apparently saying she was happy to treat your breasts as they should be treated. It's just a weird mix of generosity and maybe unsettling power dynamics. Very strange comment.
So given Sheryl's public focus on women's issues and zero tolerance for harassment, it's striking the book mentions this Facebook feminist fight club WhatsApp group.
Right, the FFC. Apparently a private space for women to discuss things like harassment.
Yeah.
The fact that it was needed suggests the official channels maybe weren't working or didn't feel safe.
And the fact that Joel Kaplan stayed, even got promoted after the investigation into his email, that's presented as evidence of the gap between the talk and the reality.
Exactly. A disconnect between the zero-tolerance stance and accountability for powerful men.
And the author even got a direct warning from a coworker about another male boss. Don't be alone with him. Don't let him talk sex stuff.
Yeah, that kind of whispered, informal warning system highlights ongoing concerns about harassment that weren't being fully addressed through official means, creating this atmosphere of caution.
Let's talk more about Joel Kaplan. His influence seems significant in the book, especially his focus on Republican politics.
Definitely. He apparently saw outrage and stretching the truth as just part of the game in politics, stemming from his own background, like his involvement in the Brooks Brothers riot during the 2000 election.
And after Trump won in 2016,
he reportedly saw it as great for tech and for business, like a signal for deregulation, hands off, all systems go.
And he celebrated the money Republicans spent on Facebook, calling it sweet, sweet coin.
Reportedly, yes. A real focus on the financial upside of political campaigns, seemingly detached from the content or its impact.
The book also suggests this network of friends and exes in leadership, people with shared political histories.
Yeah, creating this dynamic where loyalty to their tribe, these personal connections, might trump ideology or even company values in decision-making, hiring, promotions.
So the picture of leadership is complex. Demanding, maybe indifferent at times, politically connected, and increasingly focused on financial and political wins.
That's the portrait painted, yeah.
Oh.
Often seemingly at odds with broader societal concerns.
Okay, let's shift to a major project that embodies some of these tensions. Internet.org or Free Basics?
A huge initiative, but hugely controversial. The digital rights groups hated it.
Why? What was their main criticism?
They saw it as entrenching the digital divide, not bridging it, offering this limited, curated, crap version of the internet. Basically a walled garden controlled by Facebook.
Not real internet access, just access to Facebook and its chosen partners. A bait and switch to get users onto their platform.
That was the core argument. Plus, concerns about pushing complex issues like data privacy onto vulnerable populations and violating net neutrality principles.
But Facebook pushed it hard anyway, especially in places like India where regulators started questioning it.
Oh, incredibly hard. A massive, multi-million-dollar campaign. TV ads, newspaper ads, billboards, targeted dark posts on Facebook itself.
SMS campaigns, op-eds, and even organizing protests.
Yeah, the source mentions organizing protests or riots, as some in the marketing team joke, maybe incentivized with free t-shirts, blurring the line between real support and manufactured PR.
And they use that megaphone pop-up in the app in India, too.
Yes, aggressively pushing users to support Free Basics and framing the opposition really misleadingly, like net neutrality folks wanted to deny service to 1 billion people, rather than wanting open access for those people.
But despite all that money and pressure, it failed in India.
Completely failed. And the final nail in the coffin, ironically for a tech giant, was apparently a technical glitch. The system they used to submit supporter comments to the regulator, TRAI, messed up the delivery.
You can't make this stuff up. A tech company undone by a tech failure in a regulatory fight must have been chaos back at HQ.
Funereal is the word used. Fear of firings. A huge, expensive defeat.
If this wasn't the only instance of Facebook getting into complex, maybe questionable deals with governments, particularly around money, Ireland's tax situation comes up.
Right. The author describes Facebook working closely with the Irish government, led by Enda Kenny then, to extend favorable tax breaks. Specifically, the double Irish.
That controversial structure that let companies funnel profits through Ireland to tax havens.
Exactly. Sheryl Sandberg reportedly thanked Kenny for handling it, so it gave them additional 5 years of that structure, a massive financial benefit. Shows the government actively helping them minimize tax.
And Kenny even mentioned a new tax scheme for intellectual property income, and Sheryl said Facebook would help shape it.
Yeah, we'll have our team help shape them. Very direct involvement in crafting national tax law to benefit the company.
The author saw it as a backroom deal that felt wrong, even if Ireland was trying to keep jobs. Shows the power Facebook wielded.
Definitely. And their general attitude towards most governments outside the U.S. and Ireland was pretty dismissive, right? Basically claiming immunity from regulation.
Which led to that crisis in Brazil with WhatsApp.
Yeah. Diego Jadon, Facebook's VP for LATAM, got arrested because WhatsApp refused a judge's order to hand over user messages in a drug trafficking case.
And Mark Zuckerberg's public response framed it as protecting user privacy, defending someone in our community.
But internally, Elliot apparently pointed out that this someone was an accused drug trafficker who'd reportedly threatened the judge. So the reality was more complicated than the PR spin.
And the irony. The judge used Mark's own previous Facebook post about a WhatsApp block as proof that Facebook and WhatsApp were linked, justifying arresting a Facebook exec.
Exactly. Mark's own public statements came back to bite them.
This intense international focus also included a huge push into China, a new front against Google, apparently.
And pursuing China meant making some major compromises on principles Facebook had previously defended elsewhere.
Like agreeing to store Chinese user data in China, something they'd refused to do in Russia, Brazil.
Yeah, complete reversal. The author notes she herself had told other presidents Facebook would never do that. But for China, they agreed.
And the joint venture they proposed, Jupiter with Honey Capital, that involved the Chinese partner controlling content moderation according to Chinese law, including censorship.
That was reportedly the deal. And it gets worse. Facebook apparently agreed not just to allow censorship, but to build the technology for it.
Build the censorship tools, like facial recognition moderation tools.
Yes, and the expectation, as detailed, was that the Chinese partner would review everything, public posts, even private messages of Chinese users, maybe even those outside China, to enforce censorship rules.
That willingness to enable state surveillance and censorship, it's a stark contrast to how hard they fought the U.S. government over data access, even after Snowden. Mark called the U.S. Gov way over the line.
Yet they seem prepared to go much further for China market access.
And they had talking points ready for Mark to justify this, framing it as part of the mission to connect people.
Reportedly, yes, using that mission language to smooth over major ethical compromises.
Did this push into China affect decisions elsewhere, like the Guo Wenghui incident?
It seems so. Guo was a Chinese billionaire critic living abroad. The Chinese government reportedly demanded Facebook take action against his account and explicitly linked it to the China project talks, saying it would impact our cooperation.
And Mark
Blinked and blocked content on Guo's account, according to the source, a direct response to Chinese government pressure tied to business interests.
Which makes later testimony pretty awkward. Facebook's general counsel, Colin Stretch, told the Senate Intelligence Committee under oath there was no pressure from the Chinese government, and the blocking was just regular procedures.
The author clearly views that testimony as misleading, given what she apparently knew was happening internally.
The whole China effort seemed chaotic, too, like those unlicensed apps popping up.
Yeah, 2 Facebook apps launched in China without anyone apparently knowing internally until a reporter asked, caused total panic, a shit show.
And they didn't even have proper legal standing for offices or employees there. Could have brought the whole thing crashing down.
Reportedly operating without the right permits, a huge risk. Shows the haste and maybe lack of control in the push.
This drive for growth, these compromises, it connects directly to the idea of enabling harm, and leadership may be looking the other way.
Absolutely. The book uses the Philippines election, Duterte's campaign, as a key example of Facebook being weaponized early on.
How so?
Duterte's campaign effectively used fake pages, bots, trolls to spread fear and doubt, erode trust in facts. It exploited the algorithm, which the author says doesn't distinguish between fact and fiction, just amplifying whatever got engagement.
And leadership knew about this. Journalists like Maria Ressa told them.
Reportedly, yes, but no significant action was taken at the time to stop it.
And this wasn't just the Philippines. Myanmar again, after the election. Hate speech, fake news continuing.
Yeah, the team felt in over our heads. And Facebook's own security team found evidence of systematic hacking.
Hacking verified accounts to spread inflammatory content between Muslim and Buddhist groups.
Exactly. Spear phishing attacks to take over accounts and deliberately incite hatred and fear. Facebook knew this was happening on its platform.
And what was leadership's view, Joel Kaplan's perspective?
Reportedly focused on the business side. Candidates like Trump, who caused outrage, were great for Facebook because of how much money they bring in.
Dismissing concerns about lies and outrage as just part of the game?
That was reportedly his take, consistent with his political background. The sweet, sweet coin was the priority.
Then came the 2016 U.S. election fallout. Mark initially called the idea of fake news influencing it pretty crazy.
Publicly, yes. But the source describes Elliott painstakingly explaining to Mark how the Trump campaign used Facebook's tools to win, showing him it played a decisive role.
And Mark's reaction to that realization, he wasn't upset.
Not according to this account. He reportedly showed admiration for the ingenuity of it, like how smart that they figured it out.
Wow. Admiring the manipulation, not regretting the platform's role or the societal impact?
That's the picture painted, framing it as a clever hack, not a systemic failure or a harm. Yeah.
Did Elliott suggest any fixes, like supporting news organizations more?
He apparently suggested boosting profit sharing with news outlets. Kind of like buy them off or at least be fairer, since Facebook was benefiting so much while news struggled. But Mark was not into that.
No interest in helping the traditional sources of factual information. Elliott also mentioned this idea of a digital fifth estate.
Yeah, positioning Facebook as this new power center in society, alongside the press, the fourth estate, reflecting the immense influence they now clearly had, as shown by the election.
All these experiences, the culture, the growth obsession, the ethical tightropes, the personal cost, the leadership attitudes, they must have led to a breaking point for the author.
It seems so. A key turning point came with Internet.org. Realizing leadership just didn't care about the valid criticisms, the potential harm, she decided she couldn't keep pushing for something she didn't believe in, couldn't exhaust everything I have for it.
So she changed her approach.
Yeah, shifted focus internally. Still raised objections, but maybe executed orders half-heartedly. Brought concerns from activists about privacy or lack of moderation on free basics to the internal teams, but knowing they probably wouldn't fix them because leadership wasn't prioritizing it. And combining all that with her health crisis, it pushed her towards leaving, definitely. The near-death experience reinforced the feeling she had to get out, even though it was incredibly difficult.
Financially difficult, especially. Losing health insurance with her Lynch syndrome diagnosis, losing stock vesting as the main earner.
Huge hurdles. But the accumulation of everything made staying untenable, it seems.
The book points to the APEC summit in Peru as a turning point for Mark Zuckerberg, too.
Yeah, a moment where his sense of Facebook's power really seemed to crystallize. Getting selfies with heads of state, feeling like the kingmakers who could outlast politicians.
And getting dressed down by Obama didn't humble him. It made him more defiant.
Reportedly provoked petulance, yeah. And the author believes this is when he reached that dark conclusion, looking at Trump's win and thinking, if Trump can do it, so could he. The start of seriously thinking about a presidential run himself.
So his takeaway from 2016 wasn't responsibility, but inspiration for his own ambition.
That's the heavy implication. Seeing the manipulation of the system as a blueprint for his own path to power.
Which leads to that final, poignant conversation she describes having with Mark on the plane back from APEC.
Right. He asks her what she thinks about his plans, his future.
And she realizes,
this is the beginning of the end for me.
Oh.
She sees his path is all about power, disconnected from the idealisms that drew her in. She decides right then, this is the last foreign trip I invent for him.
She tried to express that feeling, that sense of lost idealism, using the rosebud metaphor from Citizen Kane.
She did, trying to connect on that level of lost innocence. The price of power.
And Mark didn't get it.
Didn't get the reference. Neither did Elliot, initially. She had to explain the plot of Citizen Kane. Even mentioning Hearst didn't immediately ring a bell for Mark.
That disconnect is so telling. She's thinking in terms of classic stories about power corrupting, and he's thinking about the mechanics of campaigning, needing to visit farms and factories. Just completely different worlds.
A powerful symbol of how far apart their perspectives had become.
So her final takeaway on the company, as presented in these excerpts, is pretty damning. Lethal carelessness.
Yeah. A failure to change course even when seeing the harm. Leadership indifference growing over time.
Profiting from callous and odious things, she says, and the frustration that they had the money and power to fix things, to do the right thing, but chose not to.
Instead, prioritizing vanity projects, commencement speeches, political networking, personal luxuries over investing in safety, integrity, addressing the damage.
Her conclusion is that these weren't seen as big ethical failures by leadership, just business as usual. A lack of basic decency they could afford but didn't exercise.
And the epilogue suggests this didn't change after she left. Figures like Joel Kaplan became even more powerful at Meta.
Right. Still deeply involved, reportedly supporting controversial figures like Kavanaugh on company time, the culture persisted, perhaps even deepened.
Which raises huge questions about the future, especially as tech power extends beyond social media.
The book makes that chilling link to AI weapons systems, right? The potential for the same carelessness seen in social media to have devastating consequences if applied to automated military systems.
Exactly. If buggy platforms create unexpected societal harm, what happens when complex, perhaps flawed, AI controls weapons with global reach? That lethal carelessness could become infinitely more lethal.
It's a deeply unsettling thought. This deep dive really gives that personal inside view of how culture and leadership decisions in one company can ripple out with massive global consequences.
Yeah, from politics to individual lives.
Yeah.
It forces you to confront that question of accountability.
What responsibility do these incredibly powerful platforms and their leaders actually have, especially when their choices shape democracies, endanger people, maybe even impact global stability now with AI?
It really pushes us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To think about how we navigate this era, how we demand that innovation and growth don't come at the cost of basic responsibility, that we reject that lethal carelessness.
And as the book powerfully suggests, that struggle, that need for accountability and a more responsible path forward for tech is nowhere near over.